They're a distraction. They're a distraction to get the public away from Ducey's failures to focus on the key issues facing Arizona, like public schools.
Ms. Fryer.
I have been opposed to ICE for many years. And so the same organization that is attacking my opponent here has ads attacking me for the same reason. Because I'm calling for a humane approach to immigration in our country. Here's the truth. The people who are calling for border security aren't really interested in keeping us safe. They want to keep us afraid. Because when we're afraid, then we'll spend millions and billions of tax dollars to lock people up, even if those people are children.
Kelly, let's stay on border security here. Would you support or would you abolish the state's border strike force?
The state's border strike force is a political prop that our current governor is using to somehow beef up his chances in this election. Here's what I will do as governor. First of all, I will pull the National Guard troops off the border and bring them home. Let them go back to work and back to school. They're not even really doing the work of security down on the border as it is. Secondly, I'm going to end contracts with private detention centers in our state and ensure that the detention centers that we have within our borders are meeting the highest standard of human rights.
David Garcia, the governor, says that the border strike force is working and deserves to be expanded. Do you agree?
I don't. I believe that the border strike force is another ploy to use immigration as a political tool to continue to provide fear mongering, and divide our communities. What we need is to take immigration on in a leadership position in this state. Mexico is a very important partner for us from a trade perspective. We need to have leadership that is going to focus on real immigration reform. We have to stop militarizing the border, using this issue as a political issue because it's dividing families, it's hurting our economy, it's hurting our reputation, and we need to look for solutions that are going to allow for those ready to contribute to Arizona to do just that.
Steve, border strike force, it was expanded this last go-around here. The governor thinks it's doing good work. Is he wrong?
I stand with our border sheriffs and all of our sheriffs in Arizona, frankly, when they say that the border strike force was never a good idea. And I voted against it in the Senate when that came through. I voted against other types of attempts at politicizing law enforcement in the legislature when I was in the House. And I stand with actually the Republican sheriff of Yuma, Leon Wilmot, actually just sent a letter to the legislature saying that any expansion of the border strike force is flat out political pork. The fact is, our border sheriffs could use the resources to be able to enforce our laws themselves. They don't need a governor trying to take credit for dealing with border security by posing in front of a few bales of marijuana and then saying that he is responsible for keeping the border secure. Our sheriffs do a great job as long as we fund them. Let DPS do their jobs on the highway so the sheriffs don't have to cover for them when they're redirected to the border strike force.
You had a rebuttal?
You know, I actually just want to reject this whole line of questioning. I think we're losing sight of the fact that there is a massive migration crisis happening around the globe. Right now on our border, there are people, moms and dads, who literally dropped everything that they had, picked up everything that they could carry, strapped their kids to their back, and came running to our border to ask for help. This immigration crisis is a humanitarian crisis. And we need to respond in a humane way, not in a military way.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia? No. Along with this humanitarian crisis, though, come real public safety concerns. And these are concerns that ranchers and families living along the border have experienced for many years. How would you use your position as governor, then, to address border security and illegal immigration concerns?
Again, I want to say I reject this line of questioning. What we're talking about, for the most part, are people who are here in our country without the right paperwork. That's the extent of what they've done. They're here and they're looking for help. Now, I understand that there are people in our country who are afraid, but they're afraid because of the narrative that's being told by people like our current president and our current governor. And it's a narrative that is painting a whole group of people as somehow dangerous because of the language they speak, because of the color they are, because of where they come from. I think that this line of questioning needs to shift to focus on our responsibility as the United States of America and as the state of Arizona to address these issues from a framework of basic human rights.
Very quickly, define border security.
You know, here's what makes people safe. Having good housing, having enough food to eat, having a good school for their kids to go to. What keeps people safe is living in a community where neighbors look out for each other and care for each other. That's security.
Mr. Farley, how would you use your position as governor to address border security and illegal immigration?
There are real border security problems. I have been down to the border. I have been with ranchers, and I have seen hilltops controlled by drug cartels near our border, in which there are guys with binoculars and AK-47s guarding the smuggling routes, which are taking drugs into this country. That needs to be stopped. And I'm convinced that this whole focus of some of our folks in D.C. and this governor has been to try to focus on these asylum seekers who are actually running from terror and separate families in order to distract from their failure in actually securing the border from drug cartels. The fact is, there are ways we can increase our border security. But I think with some of the folks who are currently in charge of D.C. and Phoenix right now, the issue of border security is too potent a political tool for their base to actually solve. There are solutions, and I look forward to putting them in place as a governor.
Can I just interrupt here? I'm having a real hard time, Steve, with the way that you're tying into this narrative. The words that you're using are frightening to people, and I think we need to stop being so afraid. We're Americans. We are Arizonans. We live in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. And frankly, our policies have helped create the crisis that is happening around this globe. We need to take 12 steps back and rebuild our approach to immigration from a human rights framework.
David, we've heard that there are border security concerns, and we've heard that the whole line of questioning should not be considered. Your position?
Well, my position is the border is an asset to Arizona and has always been an asset, and we continue to look at it as a liability. Our biggest trading partner is Mexico, and it's important that we have a relationship with them from an economic standpoint. It's important that we address this issue and be leaders as a state from a reputation standpoint. We have a situation here in Arizona where we can find and will need to find a balance between security. And on security, it's listening to people closest to the border. They'll tell you what we need. I was in Nogales with Sheriff Estrada, and he was very clear on what we needed. And it wasn't a strike force. It was a focus more on focusing on our ports of entry. But we've got another situation here in Arizona, and that is immigration is being used as a political issue. It is splitting communities apart. It is splitting families apart. And we've got young people like our dreamers here in Arizona that are ready to contribute to the only state and country that they know, and they're getting caught in the crossfires of this conversation.
Senator John McCain's prolonged absence from Capitol Hill has been a defining issue in the Republican gubernatorial primary. We all, of course, wish him well. If McCain is still a senator when you were inaugurated and he still has not returned to Washington, D.C., should he resign? Senator Farley.
No, I believe that he has that seat for as long as he is able to serve. He is a true American hero who has done amazing things for our country and our state, and I may disagree with him on a number of his issues, but I believe that he has the right to be able to, should his health be able to bear it, to continue to serve the state of Arizona as long as he wishes.
Mr. Garcia.
I agree, no. As a veteran and as somebody who has also served their country, I have tremendous respect for Senator McCain and his service to our country. And I think out of his sense of duty and the integrity in which he has served that office for many, many years, he deserves the respect to make that decision for himself.
Ms. Fryer.
There have been so many things over the years that I have disagreed with, that Senator McCain has stood for and said and done. But this is a man who has been in public service his entire life. I think that he'll be able to make the decision when that time to serve is done.
And, Ms. Fryer, if an appointment to the Senate seat must be made, who would you consider naming as a Republican replacement? It must, as you know, be a Republican.
Well, I will do what I always do when I'm faced with an important decision. I'm going to gather around me the best people that I know to come together, and we'll vet a number of Republicans in our state who have an approach to politics that will put people first, not party, not partisan politics. I think we've had enough of that in Washington and enough of that in our state.
Mr. Farley, who would you consider appointing?
I don't think it'd be appropriate to actually name anyone right now because that would disqualify them from the office ultimately. I believe that what we should be doing is finding someone who believes more strongly in serving the people of Arizona than serving a particular party. And that would go no matter who I would appoint for any position. It's the same thing that would happen in my administration. The people who would run the departments of the state of Arizona would be people who believe in serving the people above all. And that's exactly what would guide me for all the appointments I would make as governor.
And Mr. Garcia.
That's an interesting question. And the very first time in a Democratic primary, I think any of us may have gotten that question. I believe that this is a value question at the end of the day, and I am going to look for a replacement in the event that moment comes that is going to serve the best interest of Arizona. It is a value that I'm going to take to every single decision as governor, and that is making sure that we have people who are ready to serve our state, committed to the people of Arizona, and are going to continue to represent us well.
Arizona's economic outlook is positive. Unemployment is down, tax revenues are up. Some are seeing the results of congressional tax cuts, but much of rural Arizona still struggling, and many families are living paycheck to paycheck. How would you improve the economy, especially outside of Maricopa County? David Garcia, we'll start with you.
That's a very good question. You're going to hear a lot from Governor Ducey that the economy is doing well. And I want to stress again, it is doing well for only those at the top. Regular Arizonans, everyday Arizonans saw a 4% increase in their wages compared to 47% for Arizona CEOs. And so the path to economic development across Arizona, not just in rural Arizona, but across Arizona, is an investment in education, an investment in our human capital so that we can develop ideas, create businesses, and work on an economy that is going to impact all of Arizona. I am behind Universal Community College. That is extremely important for rural Arizona as they can use and rely on community colleges, which have been zeroed out, by the way, at the state level, to develop brand new economies in areas like solar, high-tech manufacturing, healthcare. And lastly, we've got to focus on businesses starting, building, and staying in Arizona. I believe that is a path not just for urban Arizona, but for all of Arizona.
That's it. Time's up. State Farley, I mean, again, it's going great guns here in Maricopa County for the most part. How do you get that kind of results in the rest of the state?
Well, the people I talk to either here in Maricopa County or throughout the state aren't thinking that it's going great guns for them. Maybe a few people at the top, it's doing pretty well, but everybody else, they're kind of worried about whether or not they can afford the health care they may have. Some people who have health care, and a lot of people don't. Some people who have health care can't afford to use it because the increase in copays, the increase in deductibles, and that's something that has to change. That's economic development too. So if people can have a decent health care system that they don't have to depend on a dead-end job to get, they can start their own businesses. And entrepreneurship is one of the key ways we can solve the economy problems in the rural areas. I would invest in committing our internet infrastructure to rural areas and tribal areas. I would also allow state funding, which we currently keep on balance in the Bank of America in New York, to be used in local banks and credit unions for micro-lending to Arizona businesses to be able to start up and nurture that entrepreneurial spirit to grow the businesses here.
Kelly Fryer, rural areas, how do you get them to not be struggling so much?
Well, it's not just rural areas. There are plenty of neighborhoods right here in Maricopa County where people are not seeing the benefit. In fact, the only people telling us that the economy is doing really great are the sliver of folks in charge for whom that's really true. But the gap between the very wealthy and everybody else in our state gets larger and larger all the time. I think we need a 15-county economic development plan. And one of the first things that I'll do as governor is to create a task force to put that plan together. And it will focus on investing our tax dollars, not in giveaways to big companies that come here from some other state or some other country bringing low-wage jobs, but we'll use our tax incentives and tax credits to support locally owned small businesses all around our state. I'm also going to create a task force to explore starting a public bank here in Arizona so that we are investing our dollars in ourselves and we are able to make investments in our own small businesses.
Your time's up there, but I do want to follow up here. You and Steve Farley both from Tucson area. Tucson area, and I know you say the entire state and not everyone in Maricopa County is doing well, but when you compare Maricopa County's economic drive against Tucson's, there is a difference. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think because the folks here in charge in Maricopa County are investing the tax dollars of our whole state in Maricopa County. And instead of in Tucson, instead of in the other 14 counties around our state, we're seeing huge millions, hundreds of millions of dollars invested in companies that are coming in to Phoenix and Scottsdale and Tempe, bringing, for the most part, low-wage jobs, instead of investing our dollars in our state.
Steve, Tucson area doesn't seem to be doing as well as the Phoenix area. Why?
Well, I would argue that the Phoenix area is probably the biggest metro, and that's where a lot of people tend to go for their large investments. But one of the things I would do as governor is govern for an entire state, not simply a county. And I think that's an important thing, to be able to have people from all over the state on the economic development agencies that run the state. The Arizona Commerce Authority Board actually had no outside of Maricopa representation for the first year and a half of its existence under Governor Ducey. And I think everybody needs to be at the table to understand that Arizona as a state offers a tremendous amount for businesses.
Your rebuttal time is up. David, thoughts on this?
Yeah, my thought is we're seeing a lot of gains in Phoenix, obviously Maricopa County because of the size. But Tucson is a fantastically sized city to have a big impact. And in my opinion, it is focusing on education in Tucson, bolstering the University of Arizona to create high-tech jobs in Pima County, and also investing in Pima Community College so that they have the opportunity to focus on career and technical high-end manufacturing jobs in solar, for example, or in manufacturing that can make a big difference.
All right, thank you.
Can I just interrupt here? It seems to me that while education is critical, it is an important component, education alone cannot solve the problems that we face in our state. It is just a piece of what we need to have happening in order to create economic development. The women and the families that I work with at the YWCA who are struggling to achieve economic sustainability for their families can't wait for our kindergartners to grow up and start businesses to give them jobs. We need to be investing in our people right now.
Okay. Steve, you want to say?
I did want to point out that before I was an elected official, I was leading an effort called the Regional Transportation Authority in Pima County. And for the first time in 40 years, we got a transportation package together, including a Tucson modern streetcar system that revitalized a moribund downtown. That has already done a tremendous amount of work, creating hundreds of jobs and actually encouraging headquarters like Caterpillar Corporation to come to downtown Tucson, specifically along the streetcar line, because that was where they wanted to be. You invest in infrastructure, and that creates economic development that helps business as well.
Thank you,
I
Senator.
agree. And that's why I think we need to be looking at things like a public bank. It took how many years, Steve? 20 years to get the streetcar in Tucson? And that's in part because the capital isn't there in order to be investing in our infrastructure, to be investing in our locally owned small businesses. I think we need to really look at the systems and the structures and be more creative about our solutions to these problems.
Dave, we want to get you in here.
Yeah, this is the reason why I am focusing my efforts in higher education, starting with community colleges. Because in 2 years, we can have Arizonans retrained, ready to go out there and participate and develop new economies. It's not a 20-year plan. This is 2 years until we have certificates and people ready to go out and take high-wage jobs, create new economies. This is focus on education isn't about just the future. It's about having an impact today.
Over the past month, we have reported on a state lawmaker who was using his legislative immunity to get out of a speeding ticket. As the state's chief executive, how would you deal with legislative immunity, Mr. Garcia?
Well, first and foremost, we've got to stop electing folks who are going to take advantage of legislative immunity. I mean, I'm looking at this as a parent here, and we've got somebody who has been specifically a bad actor and was boastful about it. And I think that the people of Arizona, first and foremost, needs to take this into their own hands and not elect folks who are going to take advantage of legislative immunity. Beyond that, to the extent that we need to tinker it so that we have elected officials who are not above the law, we should certainly do that. But I really put my faith in the voters of Arizona when they elect people who are going to abuse the system, who are going to put themselves above the citizens of Arizona. My hope is that we stop sending those folks to office.
Senator Farley.
Traffic safety has been one of my key points in the legislature. I actually was the first legislator in the country to introduce a bill to ban driving while texting in January 2007. Street safety, or the safety of our roads, is absolutely crucial to our quality of life because we're on them every single day. And for a legislator to think that they can be above the law and endanger themselves and others because they are a legislator is absolutely outrageous. First of all, Governor Ducey was wrong when he said he needed to change it. The law, to me, is clear in the Constitution that if you're doing criminal speeding, you can be taken into custody right away, even with the existing language. But even with that, I've been proud to co-sponsor in the legislature several years when I was there, legislation from Democrats to try to eliminate this constitutional immunity clause, because there is no need for it now. That was a 19th century thing when county sheriffs would try to lock up legislators to keep them from voting. I don't see that need today, and there's certainly no need for anybody to be above the law, especially legislators.
Ms. Fryer.
You know, I can't think of very many things that I have agreed with our current governor about, but I think he's right that no one is above the law. The problem is that ending legislative immunity is just one part of this issue. The fact is, this current administration is corrupt to its core. I'm sure, you know, we've all seen the reports of the member of the Pharmacy Commission who was just discovered to have been taking $700,000 from pharmaceutical companies. This current administration is filled with cronyism, with a lack of ethics, and with people who are in government to benefit themselves and their wealthy friends. One of the things that I will prioritize is appointing people to my administration, to the boards and commissions of this state, who are committed to the principle of people first, not profits.
Since last fall, we have also reported on allegations of sexual harassment at the state capitol. How would you address harassment issues involving state lawmakers and state government leaders, Mr. Garcia?
This is another important issue. I'm going to take this extremely seriously out of respect for everyone and having a workplace that is going to be productive and is going to be healthy for everybody, regardless of your gender, regardless of your race, regardless of your sexual orientation. We are going to have a government under me as governor that is going to take a no tolerance policy toward discrimination, toward harassment, and toward treating people in ways that we simply shouldn't. And when those situations come up, it's going to be swift action to make sure we understand exactly what happened. We learn from those to ensure that we've got training and access to treatment. Pardon me, we've got an opportunity to educate. And when we do that, we've got to make sure that we do not have discrimination at any office in the state.
Senator Farley.
2 words: zero tolerance. If you're going to sexually harass someone in my administration, you're fired. The same thing ought to happen in the legislature. We should not be electing people, but if the voters decide to elect them, people who are harassers, then they must be investigated and expelled by the fellow members of the body. There is no place for sexual harassment in Arizona, period.
Ms. Fryer.
You know, look, this is no joke. We've seen across the country the Me Too movement and women coming forward and finally, you know, claiming their voice about these kinds of things. But I think what we have here is a structural issue. And here's how I plan to address it. On my first day, I'll be signing an executive order that will make LGBTQ a protected class for all state employees and state contractors. It will also ban asking salary history of anyone going through a job opening application here at the state. And it will require unconscious bias and structural racism training for all state employees. I think we need to get at the heart of what's really going on here, and we need to begin changing the culture of our state government.
Thank you. Arizona continues to experience a drought. It threatens our water supply. Would you support water restrictions, such as cutbacks to lawn watering, these sorts of things, to avoid imposed cuts to CAP water? Steve Farley.
Water is one of our most crucial issues we have to face here as the state of Arizona. And what I wouldn't do is what Doug Ducey has done, which is to have secret water meetings behind closed doors with invitation-only people there to create a predetermined political outcome to benefit him politically. What I would do is look back at what Bruce Babbitt did, and as he helped develop the 1980 Groundwater Management Act, which is internationally renowned as one of the best pieces of water legislation in the country. We need to be able to have everyone at the table, everyone, even if you think they might disagree with you. And we can do a lot of things. One of the things I think that they should look at to try to do is create an active management area that covers the entire state, so we can look at all of our water use. We also should be talking with our agricultural friends. One of the things I was proud to help do in this last session legislature was legalize the agricultural use of hemp. While there is some drug use in it, you cannot get high unless you smoke a field. But it replaces alfalfa and cotton, which use about 10 times as much water and could help us a great deal.
Time is up. The question is, would you support water restrictions to avoid imposed cuts due to lack of CAP water? Kelly?
My answer to that question is yes. Look, we're in the worst drought in 1,000 years, and our current leadership is selling our water off to the highest bidder. One of the very first things I'll do is to pull together some of the best water experts in the world. They happen to work right here in our universities. I'm going to bring those scientists to the table along with impacted communities, and together we're going to create a 100-year comprehensive plan for water sustainability in Arizona. Now, I don't know exactly all the details of that plan because we need to get the scientists at the table. But I do know that we're going to have to work with our neighbors to renegotiate agreements about the Colorado River. We're going to have to work with the sovereign tribal nations within our borders to come to agreements about the water that they have. And we're going to have to hold developers in the state to the highest standard. And yes, I know it's going to hurt, but we're going to have to get really serious about conservation in the state.
David, how serious do we need to get, and would you, as governor, support water restrictions ahead of imposed cuts to water?
Water is probably the single issue that keeps me up at night, because this is one where we are looking at our sustainability and our future here as a state. And I believe we need to have a tough conversation about conservation, about looking at restrictions. Otherwise, we are going to be in a position where we're going to live in a state that is inhabitable. And from my perspective, this is a circumstance where Governor Ducey's leadership and lack thereof, his mistrust, is hurting Arizonans. You do need to bring everybody to the table. We have got to make sure that everyone with a stake in Arizona's future and in our water, which includes our tribal nations, developers, agriculture, cities and towns, as well as everyday Arizonans, are at the table to find a common solution to this issue. And it will be one of the first issues that I take on as governor.
So would you support preventive measures?
We have to take on preventive measures. It's a tough conversation. It's a conversation about looking past short-term gains and difficulties to make sure that we are looking for the long-term sustainability.
Would you support water restrictions to prevent imposed cuts? Because I don't think we got a yes or a no on that first.
I think there are better solutions, and that's why I talked about agriculture use of hemp. Because the fact is, agriculture is 70% of water use in this state right now. If you can reduce that water use, and only use 10% of what we're using right now by substituting crops that can be sold at more of a profit. For instance, alfalfa can be substituted for hemp. and hemp is used as animal protein for animal feed, and hemp can also be used in substitute of cotton for fabrics, but it uses 10% of the water. We could do a lot of different things to cut back on our usage without restrictions.
Thank you, Senator. The Arizona Corporation Commission has been dogged by allegations of corruption and wrongdoing for years now. How would you clean up the Corporation Commission, Mr. Garcia?
Well, I think this is a circumstance where, first off, I am behind, let's start with the broader picture here. I'm behind efforts in Arizona to focus on renewable energy. And I know that that is the Corporation Commission's area. It's an area where they have not taken enough action. And we have got to take money out of politics. Our Corporation Commission is in this position because of the corruption going on at the state level. We have a government that right now is corrupt at its core, a government that is looking out for a few people and their own political best interest. We've got to return to a circumstance where voters have their say, where we have people running and serving in government that are looking out for the best interest of Arizona. And as governor, I am not taking corporate PAC money. I'm not taking lobbyist dollars, so that as I go forward and lead Arizona, we can walk right past those lobbyists, right past those folks with their corporate interest, and focus on the people of Arizona.
Mr. Farley.
We have a Corporation Commission that is there in large part that has been bought and paid for by some of the very people they are regulating. That's a problem. It's a problem of dark money. I've been fighting against dark money and dirty money in my entire time in the legislature. I actually helped to write the Dirty Money Initiative, and I hope people vote for that here in November. I'm one of the nation's leading experts on ALEC, the Arizona Legislative Exchange Council. I created a bill in 2011 that would force ALEC, this group that's funded by D.C. conservatives and corporations, to send Republican legislators to fancy resorts and wine and dine them, and send them back with bills that they want them to run and turn into laws in their own cities. I would have forced them to register as lobbyists. In 2012, Bill Moyers did a documentary called United States of ALEC, which you can still find online. He flew to Arizona to profile me and interview me about my work to try to stop that form of dark money. I will continue to do that, and once I am governor, we're going to roll back some of those statutes that make it easier for large corporations to purchase influence in Arizona.
Thank you, Ms. Fryer.
You know, look, I don't think we can forget the fact that the Arizona Corporation Commission has been elected. Why are crooks getting elected to office in Arizona? They're not being elected by the people of Arizona. They're being elected by a lot of folks who sat home and didn't vote. The question is, why are so few people in Arizona voting? And the last time there was a gubernatorial primary, something like a quarter of all registered Arizona voters participated. People in our state have really lost faith in our government. They've lost faith in our government because they've seen decades of leaders who have put their own interests and the profits of their wealthy friends first. I'm running to be the governor of Arizona because I've spent my entire life in service to my community. My commitment is that every policy I write, every bill I sign, every budget I draft will be done through a human rights lens. I only have one goal: to do what's right for the people of Arizona.
And time's up there. But let's start with you for the next question, probably the final one we have time for. We'll see. Arizona is known nationally for being on the vanguard of socially conservative legislation, ranging from abortion restrictions to religious freedom. The question: how would you approach special interest groups that have in great part successfully advocated for these issues? Kelly, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm going to pick up right exactly where I left off. Our state continues to have in elected office people who do not represent the values of our state. The majority of people in Arizona believe that LGBTQ folks should have equal rights, should have equal access to marriage. The majority of folks in Arizona believe that women should have the ability to control their own bodies. The majority of Arizonans actually share these basic values of freedom and justice and dignity and opportunity for all. But we have these folks who have been elected to office who are in the pocket of people like Kathy Herod at the Center for Arizona Policy and the Koch brothers and ALEC. The people of Arizona, I'm going to just say this clearly, people, you need to vote. You have good options this year. You have people who care about our state, who care about our future. You have the power to make a change. It's up to you.
Thank you. David Garcia, special interest groups, how are you going to handle them?
I believe the special interest groups have had a disproportional influence on Arizona because we have not heard the true voice of Arizonans. In order for us as a state to move forward and to make progress and to make sure that all voices are heard, we do need to increase voter turnout. We need to focus on the will and the voice of the people. And to get that done, we need candidates who are committed, who are grounded in their communities, committed to advancing their communities, and are willing to fight for those communities. Special interest groups wait at the Capitol. They wait at the Capitol with influence, with lobbyists. And I'll say it again, I am not taking lobbyist dollars or corporate dollars, PAC money, so that I can go out and serve the people of Arizona. And it is when we do that that we don't have to kowtow to special interest groups. We can focus on serving the people of Arizona, and they're looking for that. It's the reason they're not coming out in the numbers that they should, and it's the focus of our campaign to increase voter turnout.
Time's up. Thank you. Steve.
This has been a failure of Doug Ducey's leadership. We have a governor now who is governing for a couple of billionaires from Kansas instead of the people of Arizona. There are a number of ways you can look at what's happened under that leadership. When he first came into office, he fired 150 corporate tax auditors in the Department of Revenue. These are people who actually go after tax cheats, and each one of them recovers $1.5 million a year in revenues that we could use to invest in our schools or our roads or in health care for all of us. And he fired 150 of them. Why would you do that unless you're governing from people who don't care about the quality of life of Arizona? If you only care about shrinking government to the size you can drown it in the bathtub, like his friend Grover Norquist. We need to have a governor who believes in the ideal that government can be doing public service to for the people of Arizona and not simply private enrichment. And that's what it'll take.
Yes or no question. Mr. Farley, would you support any of your rivals up here if you do not advance to the general election?
Without question. We have to get rid of Governor Ducey.
Mr. Garcia?
Yes, of course.
Ms. Fryer?
Yes.
All right. And we will end it on that. Thank you all for joining us tonight. It's time now for closing statements and going in reverse order of our opening statements. We start with Kelly Fryer.
You know, look, so many of the things that we have talked about tonight go beyond politics. We are facing in our state a moral crisis. Right now tonight, there's a little girl in a detention center in Arizona who's crying herself to sleep, missing her mom. There are public school teachers across our state who are wondering how they're going to pay their rent. The last thing we need is another politician who promises to fix it. Politicians have gotten us into this mess. And look, just having a different face or a different name in the governor's office isn't going to fix it either. I am asking you to elect someone this year who will put you first, who has only one goal: to show up every single day and work to make sure that there is justice, freedom, opportunity for all. I'm asking you to elect me.
Our next closing statement is from Mr. Garcia.
I'm running for governor on a mission. I'm running for governor to invest in education, to stamp out corruption at the state level, and to build an economy that works for all of Arizona. The big issues tonight were education. And I want the public to understand that there will be no governor more committed to public education than me. I've dedicated 20-plus years to improving public schools, and nobody is more qualified to take on the issues addressing our public schools. It is my strength, it is Ducey's weakness, and it's the reason why not only am I running, but we're winning. And it's the reason why we continue to see attack ads from Doug Ducey to distract the public away from his failings. The other big issue tonight was corruption. And we need a governor who is ready to fight for the rest of Arizona, a governor from Arizona who's ready to fight for Arizona, who's not taking corporate PAC money, not taking lobbyist dollars so that they can serve you. I look forward to being that governor.
Okay.
I'd be honored to have your vote.
Thank you. And for our final closing statement, Steve Farley.
When I've been around this country, around this state, talking with people all over for the last 18 months, Republicans, Democrats, independents, all of them, I hear the same thing. People are tired of reality show stars and ideological warriors. They just want grown-ups in the room. Just solve our problems. We got a whole lot of problems to solve, and there are solutions. People are excited about the idea of having someone with the experience and understanding of the processes, policies, and people in state government to know how to not just say nice things, but to get things done. In 2013, I worked across the aisle with Jan Brewer, of all people, who I disagreed with about almost everything, as we expanded Medicaid to 400,000 people in poverty, health insurance. We saved lives. We kept our hospitals afloat. We worked together. What the people of Arizona want is us to just get to work. And that's what I'd love to have as your governor. I'd love to have your vote. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, candidates. Thank you very much. That's it for the Democratic debate for Arizona governor, brought to you by Arizona PBS and the Arizona Republic.
Thank you so much to the candidates for your participation, and thank you for watching. I'm Yvonne Wingett Sanchez.
And I'm Ted Simons. Now, please tune in to Arizona Horizon tomorrow at 5:30. We'll meet one of the Republican candidates for governor, and we'll meet these same candidates on Arizona Horizon Thursday evening. So catch that as well. That's it for now. Thanks for joining us. You have a great evening.